Now, the voice of children has been ignored by the COVID inquiry. That's according to more than 40 leading charities and experts in a letter to Baroness Hallett.
That's right. The charities include Save the Children and the NSPCC, and they're demanding an explanation for unacceptable delays and examining the impact of the pandemic on young people. We're joined now by Dan Paskins, Director of UK Impact at Save the Children. Good morning, Dan. Great to see you.
Morning.
I must start by asking you, you probably heard me before the break, where were charities like you when lockdowns were happening, when schools were being closed, when Great Ormond Street Hospital were reporting an extraordinary increase in head trauma to children who were locked at home with abusive parents? Where were Save the Children during that period of time?
So right from the start of the lockdown, Save the Children were directly supporting families. So we provided grants to families, working with local schools, nurseries and other local charities. And that's to help with things like food, to help with learning packs, to help with toys, things for children to play. And we were also, together with many other charities, saying to the government throughout the pandemic that it was really important to consider children and their experiences. Now, there's some really tough decisions, that the government was making throughout this time, things where people had some really strong opinions, where, to be honest, there's good arguments on both sides. But what's really important, and unfortunately didn't happen enough, was that the sort of best interests of children were considered. And where there was a decision taken, which would have a damaging impact on children, that the government thought about, well, what would need to be done in order to minimise that or to sort of make things up afterwards. So that's something which we were saying, and many charities were saying sort of all the way during the pandemic. But it's really important that that continues to be the case, because it's not like this has gone away.
But were you
more and more challenges that children are experiencing now?
But Dan, can I just ask you, were you amongst some people, if from all a spectrum of outlets across the country, be that media or doctors or teachers or charities, who were frightened to question the government narrative at the time, who weren't looking at the risk to children of COVID, which was statistically zero, and making more noise to change government policy, to get them to wake up to the damage that was going to be caused for decades?
I don't think we'd ever be sort of scared to speak up about what's best for children. It's that's vital for what we do. Throughout, as I say, we both directly, but also amplifying, the excellent work that was done by others, by sort of parents groups, by the charities, by everyone who was looking at what's best for children. But as I say, some of these were difficult decisions where almost whatever decision was taken would cause some difficulty. So it's about doing what's right and sort of thinking about what matters for children.
According to Companies House, Save the Children got £65 million of government grants in 2020 during lockdowns. Did that make it hard for you to push back on government policy when there was one direction of travel with that narrative?
No, there was never any sort of question that we wouldn't sort of speak up for children because of funding, and that's for Save the Children's international work. So this is particularly we're talking about sort of children in the UK. We wouldn't stop speaking up for children in the UK because we're also sort of helping children all around the world. OK,
well, let's move it on to now. I appreciate you clarifying that. The COVID inquiry at the moment, Baroness Hallett has this job of coming to a conclusion. It will take years. It has so far cost us, I think, £40 million to date. And we're barely started on this inquiry at the moment. Children weren't included in the terms of reference at all in the beginning. And actually a very new charity, Us for Them, with Molly Kingsley, a campaigning group, they were the people who got children put on that terms of reference in the first place. So what are you calling for now? Why is it taking you so long?
Well, so we work together with Us for Them and together with the great work of Molly and her colleagues. So to make that case, first of all, that children should be considered in the inquiry, because, as you say, it's fairly extraordinary that in the original terms of reference, thinking about the impact of COVID, didn't even mention children at all. And that's kind of part of what the problem is. We're now part of the inquiry, and at every single hearing of the inquiry, we have said that there needs to be ways of listening to children. And every time, and Baroness Hallett, chair of the inquiry, has got a really tough job. Every time she said that it's really important to her personally, to listen to children. But unfortunately, it's been going on quite a long time now, as you say, and we're still not seeing the sort of seriousness and the urgency, really, because obviously, children's memories fade and that sort of thing. So more needs to be done to really listen to children about their experiences and learn from that for the future.
OK, Dan, specifically in this report, there have been no personal testimonies, have there, from children, the chance to have their say about how lockdowns impacted them. How are you gathering that information, and what kind of things do you expect the children will be saying?
So at the moment, the inquiry's got a campaign called Every Story Matters, and it says they want to hear about everyone's experiences. And then you read the small print, and it says only if you're over 18. And we think that sends entirely the wrong message. Your story only matters if you're over 18. Now, it is more complicated to sort of think about how to listen to children. Obviously, some children had a really tough time. We don't want them to have to relive that without the right kind of support. So it's something which does, there does need to be thought about how to make sure you can hear from all children of all ages. But there's plenty of ways of doing it. So we're saying that the inquiry ought to work with sort of experts who are really good at different ways of listening to children, can make sure they can have the right kind of supports that they need, but not just do it for the sort of sake of it, but to actually make a commitment that what they're hearing from children directly feeds into the investigations that the inquiry is making and the recommendations it comes up with.
It should be parents, Dan, as much as children. If you ask my young teenagers what do they think of lockdowns, they will tell you they loved it. They didn't have to go to school. They had a great time. They watched too much telly. They ate too much rubbish at home. It was the parents. We understand the impact on their education. We're the ones that can see their tech addiction. We're the ones that can see they all got a bit fat and they all got a bit unfit during lockdowns because all the sports facilities closed. We need parents' testimony in this inquiry, don't we?
We certainly do, hearing from parents is really important. There'll be all kinds of different experiences that parents had, but I think also children had a really wide range of experiences. Some had a brilliant time, some had a really not very good time, and actually
the older teens was awful.
Experience.
Yeah.